Vancouver, the largest and most populous city in British Columbia, with a population density of about 6,000 people per square kilometer. That's 15,000 per glorious, free, American square mile. With that many people, everyone needs to be somewhere, whether for work, school, or recreation, dude. So, you see bike lanes, sky trains,
incredibly notable highways!
But somehow with high-speed roads, the city spoils our fun. You look right at a map and you'll see freeways. There are none. So why are there no freeways in which people may maneuver? We'll answer that in this here episode of Undercouver. Vancouver is often touted as one of the odd cities in North America without a freeway, which isn't entirely true because
the Trans-Canada Highway
runs through the northeast.
But notice how all of the exits drop you off just as it gets to the city boundary. Not very useful for getting downtown, which, let's be honest, most of us think of as Vancouver.
Really quickly though, this is Metro Vancouver. For perspective, it takes more than an hour and a half to get from one end to the other. What we're talking about here is downtown Vancouver. It also takes about half an hour to get from one end to the other. Traffic, anyone? Anyway, a lot of the major roads going downtown are actually classified as provincial highways. But they don't really feel like provincial highways.
Highway 99, or Granville Street, crosses False Creek and even gets entrance and exit ramps, but splits into two one-way streets. If you go along Highway 1A, part of which is Main Street, it takes a left at the Georgia and Dunsmuir viaducts, crosses over absolutely nothing, and also splits into two one-way streets. Hastings Street is classified as Highway 7A. It doesn't even have entrance and exit ramps. It is just a street.
So why do all these freeways shy away from downtown? Being such a big city, why have Vancouver planners not come up with the incredibly simple solution of building a proper capital F freeway? Well, the simple answer is they have. But I can't just leave you there. Papa needs his monetization. So we have to go all the way back to the
1960s.
The 60s were a time of revolution and change across the world. The Vietnam War, the Cold War, what is it good for? But for Vancouver, with the 60s came an important change in its form and function. In 1964, the Trans-Canada Highway, then called the 401, had barged right through Vancouver's door. This triggered a wave of far-out plans, and even Victoria got in on the fun. But one in particular caught the government's eye. Project 200.
In 1966, a plan was proposed to build over this rail yard, a plan which boasted large offices, department stores, and housing blocks, which would provide jobs and housing for tens of thousands.
And to top it all off, an ambitious crosstown freeway network.
It would have been bigger and better than every other project in Greater Vancouver. But why were they even considering doing this?
Well, these guys were leaving here because of him. And after this, they returned and were able to get a lot of this because Canada won. And with all this, they were buying lots of this, and this. No, wait. Sorry, they were buying a whole lot of this, and this. But to get from here to here, we would need a whole lot more of this. So, the man chosen to bring this plan to life was Englishman Gerald Sutton-Brown, Vancouver's first chief planner, who was born in Jamaica.
Bombclot.
The city council, led by him, got to work.
They got all the best construction paper, pencil crayons, and glitter glue money could buy, made progress, got it done, and immediately handed over the reins to an American planning firm. And in 1967, this was the map that the city council got.
Before they got to sticking shovels in the ground, they needed to prove that this site was optimal for a freeway.
So they gathered data. These lines show where a freeway would be most viable. Using this data, they then published this more precise plan. 2 freeways would converge in the heart of downtown, in what was going to be called the Georgia Interchange, so called because of the Georgia Viaduct, which citizens voted to replace 2 years ago and was now under construction. Under construction. One freeway would cut through the east side and end at Beatty Street, and another would cut through Chinatown and the waterfront and cross the Burrard Inlet on what would effectively become the 3rd Narrows Crossing.
However, it was quite controversial.
It would have cut straight through Strathcona, Gastown, and Chinatown. All historic neighborhoods. When the residents saw this, they froke out. Froke? Yes, they were mad. Just like the rest of the world in the late 60s, city governments were planning freeways and citizens were protesting them. They argued that a freeway would kill Chinatown. Literally, that's what they said. And a closer look at the plan reveals that Chinatown would indeed be heavily impacted. This is Chinatown today, and this is what the freeway would look like if it had been built. A good chunk of Chinatown would be gone, as well as a good chunk of Gastown. And wherever would we be without the beloved clock that doesn't run on steam, but pretends to run on steam anyway because it's a poser?
Another neighborhood in jeopardy was Park Lane, otherwise known as Hogan's Alley.
To make way for the new viaducts, the city demolished more than half of the neighborhood. It was home to mostly Canadians of color, indigenous background, immigrants, and Jimi Hendrix's grandma. Yes, she lived here. Hogan's Alley also hosted a very vibrant nightlife, with Vi's Chicken and Steakhouse in particular being quite the spot, being visited by multiple touring musicians such as Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, and Louis Armstrong. This just gave the residents even more reason to be against the plan. Then Vancouver Mayor Tom Campbell, in a somewhat bemusing speech, addressed them as, and I quote, Maoists, communists, pinkos, left-wingers, and hamburgers. Unsurprisingly, this added more fuel to the fire, and the city council was in just as much panic. To please the mob, the freeway would instead use the new and improved Georgia Viaduct, then would go along Falls Creek, so it didn't even have to touch Chinatown, then under Thurlow Street as a tunnel. But still, to absolutely no one's surprise, people didn't like it, so they tried again. This time, the freeway would go along the Grandview Cut, where the Millennium Line runs today, and end at Beatty Street. It didn't cut through downtown, and they would even have trains under it.
But the people protested even harder. They managed to get 21,000 signatures to never ever have a freeway in Vancouver ever again and make Chinatown a historic district. Vancouver just couldn't get on with it. So, by the 1970s, money had run out because of all the planning. But the city was also already halfway through the viaduct replacement, so that continued no problem. And today, we're left with these elevated roads that end after just a kilometer and carry less than half of the cars they were designed to handle. On the upside, however, no political party, or anyone really, ever since, has put forward any serious plan to build freeways downtown since the 90s. But without the vital transport connection, how were people supposed to get from Vancouver to the North Shore? Or better yet, how was Vancouver gonna get to Vancouver? What was the solution to this commuting conundrum?
It was clear by this time that the city of Vancouver was just not destined for a freeway, and it's understandable because of its tricky logistics. Not to mention they had lost all the freeway funding. There was and is simply no way to build one without cutting straight through downtown.
But a transit solution was desperately needed, so the government started talk of the next best thing, the SkyTrain. Well, that's stupid. That's like if they made a sea bus. What will they think of next? Stupid.
10 years later, the C-Bus was put into service in 1977, meaning a third Narrows would no longer be needed. Another 10 years, the SkyTrain was unveiled at Expo 86, forever revolutionizing Vancouver transit.
So what remains of these failed megaprojects from 60 years ago? Only one of the many planned office buildings were ever built, and this is 200 Granville Street. Fitting. This patch of grass on Gore and Union Street was meant to be for one of the slip lanes. The other half of Hogan's Alley is still here, albeit in a very different condition. And the viaducts have to be the dead giveaway that a freeway was supposed to go here. These are great reminders, but not enough to visualize. So what would it have looked like if built to plan?
Well, you don't have to travel very far. Just 2 kilometers from downtown on the east side, Stewart Street passes in front of this factory.
An elevated freeway system passing Carroll Street would have looked something like this.
Farther away, 30 kilometers from downtown, is the Cape Horn
Gay porn.
interchange in Coquitlam.
This hybrid stacked monster handles the movements of 4 major roads.
While an engineering marvel, it can be tricky to navigate since not all of the roads connect to each other.
If the plan went through, it would have meant one of these, smack dab in the middle of
Downtown Vancouver. So the general consensus today is that a Vancouver freeway is, was, and always has been a bad idea. Or was it?
The 3 neighborhoods we mentioned earlier, including Mount Pleasant, would have had a very small amount of space taken up by the freeway, so very few people would be displaced. And with the by default density the housing projects would provide, that means the freeway wouldn't really have affected the job or housing market, unlike most North American cities.
But that isn't the only argument for a freeway. There are a whole lot of pros and cons.
Some pros include 1. Ease of congestion.
Vancouver was the 4th worst for traffic on the entire continent in 2023. And it has the busiest port in the country, which means lots and lots of trucks.
2. Housing.
We've all heard about the housing crisis. Those housing projects would have kept the prices down.
3. Looks.
It would have doubled downtown's size by covering over this rail yard. Imagine how much nicer it would have been with this out of sight. And consider the geography and timing. Prior to the announcement that Vancouver was going to be hosting the World Fair, the waterfront and False Creek were just drab tracts of industrial land. It made sense to put something useful, yet ugly here.
But all these points were equally well when used against freeways.
More lanes means more traffic because of the curse of induced demand. Encourage driving and people will drive. The projects in the 60s probably weren't the only opportunity to keep housing prices down. The viaducts today have a lot of dead space in between them, as is necessary with elevated freeways. A full system would have meant more like this. Want to know something useful but not ugly? Parks, which we've done an absolutely swell job at implementing.
Oh yeah, and that whole thing about only a small amount of the neighborhoods being affected? Absolute bogus. Multiple livelihoods would need to be relocated, adjusted, and essentially destroyed to make space for a giant concrete monstrosity whose effects had the capability and were literally intended to displace, effectively, all of Vancouver's poor and/or minority population. After all, it could not have been a coincidence that the roads just so happened to cut through the densest areas of these communities.
The fact that there was an alternative that didn't displace anyone proves that this very much was racist infrastructure.
It's also very important to consider who actually should get to decide what's best for Vancouver, its natives or its users.
Let's face it, quite a number of you watching this video are people from outside Vancouver saying, oh, that freeway would have been so useful to get downtown, and now they're tearing down the viaducts, making it even harder. Well, I also live outside Vancouver, and I think this was a terrible plan.
Have you ever thought of the people who actually live here? The thousands of people who call Strathcona and Chinatown their home, and have possibly called it that for generations.
The point is, we can't always plan ahead. So regardless of if it would have been a good plan or not, mistakes like these are crucial in shaping the future of the city. Long video short, Vancouver doesn't have any freeways because Vancouverites have proven time and time again that they don't want one and arguably don't need one. Vancouver is a strong, independent city who don't need no freeways. There are plenty more pros and cons we could discuss, but at the end of the day, it's understandable that people disagree about this even 60 years later. After all, democracy requires differing opinions like these to reach a compromise. Without those protesters, Vancouver would have been a very different city. So, always remember, take advantage of the existence of a city council. Vote! Please! You never know, you can make a difference in your community that would impact generations to come. So, that's the story of Vancouver's freeway debacles, and whether or not it was a good plan is entirely up to you.
However, that isn't the only lesser-known plan Vancouver's had. In fact, there was a whole nother way to get around that basically built Vancouver as a city. What was this system and why don't we see it anymore? Find out in the next episode of Undercouver.